Hello dear colleagues, this lecture is about epithelial tissues. And if you like this video or this lecture, please hit the like button below the video. Also subscribe to my channel to get notified when I upload new lectures. And also check the description below because I put links to all my social media in the description. So first let's talk about covering epithelial tissue. So this covering epithelium covers all body surfaces exposed to the external environment, external to the body, right? External to the body. So it covers the body from the external environment. It lines body cavities that are open to the external environment, and it lines the ducts of glands, which are also opening to the outside. And so the main function of the covering epithelium is to act as a barrier between the internal environment of the body and the external environment of the body. Okay, so that's the most important function. And based on its location, there are two types of covering epithelium. No, one is simple epithelium, and number two is stratified epithelium. So let's talk about simple epithelium. So simple epithelium is made of one single layer of cells, and all these cells are attached to a basement membrane. So basement membrane is going to be the base, right? The basal lamina and reticular fibers, so we call it basement membrane. All these cells are going to be attached to this basement membrane, and the function of this type of simple epithelium is secretion, absorption, diffusion, filtration, and some types are going to be specialized for sensory reception. Sensory reception. So what do I mean by this? Imagine that you have a very thin layer of cells, only one cell layer. So if you're going to compare this with a brick wall, this is going to be equivalent to one brick, right? Because in a brick wall, you're going to have multiple layers of bricks. But here we only have one layer, so this is going to be really, really thin. So if you want to cross from one side to the other, you're not going to need a lot of distance, you just need to go through one cell layer. So that's why simple squamous epithelium is going to be really good for exchange of materials. Okay, so exchange of materials. And also simple epithelium is going to be attached to a basement membrane, and this basement membrane is going to be very close to the blood vessels. Okay, so that's why this type of simple epithelium is going to be really good for exchange of materials. So let's talk now about the different types of simple epithelium and their locations and functions. So the first type is simple squamous epithelium. So we talked about this already. This is a simple epithelium, one layer of cells. Now these cells are going to be thin, flat cells, irregular shape. The nuclei are going to be round, and they look like they're piled up, right? So that's how they look like. They're flat, thin cells. These are going to line blood vessels and lymphatic system. These are going to be really good for exchange of materials. Also the alveoli of the lungs. So alveoli of the lungs, these are going to be also really good for gas exchange. Gas exchange, so that's the location and the function. If you take a look at the picture, the simple squamous epithelium, you're going to see that it looks really thin. It's a single layer of thin flat cells. The second type is simple cuboidal epithelium. So these cells are cube-shaped, right? Short prisms, short columns, square-like. Their nuclei are round and located centrally, so they're centrally located. And these cells are going to line the kidney tubules, and the ureters. Ureters, okay. The third type is simple columnar epithelium. So these are tall rectangular cells, right? Their nuclei are going to be elongated, and often they're going to have cilia. So these are going to line the lining of the digestive tract. So from the stomach to the anus. So this is the small intestine, right? And these microvilli, you might say, what are these? Well, these microvilli are actually going to increase the surface area of the small intestine. So that's why you're going to find them in the small intestine. We need to absorb nutrients, and these microvilli are going to help us with that. And then the last type is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So the word pseudostratified means false stratified. Why? Because even though these cells look like they're stratified, right? They're not stratified, they're simple. So they're actually simple, they're just looking stratified. And the nuclei are going to be different heights, different levels, okay, so that's why they're looking stratified. Also these cells may contain goblet cells which secrete mucus. Goblet cells, they're going to look like a goblet and they're going to secrete mucus. So the function of this type of epithelium is secretion, Absorption, sometimes beating the cilia to move fluids along, and some of them are going to be ciliated. These are going to line the respiratory tract. So now let's talk about stratified epithelium. Stratified epithelium is made of several layers of cells, so this time it's not one layer. It's multiple layers of cells, okay, and these are going to be stacked on top of each other. So instead of having one layer, we're going to have multiple layers. So in this case, because we have multiple layers, we're going to have more protection. More protection. So where do we need protection? In areas where we're exposed to a lot of friction, right? Friction. So that's the main function of stratified epithelium is protection. Protection. Stratified squamous epithelium. So stratified epithelium can be stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, or stratified columnar. So this time it's going to be stratified squamous. So many layers of flat cells, right? Multiple layers of flat cells. So what happens is we're going to have multiple layers of flat cells, and the ones that are going to be closer to the external environment are going to be thin, flat cells, and the deeper layer are going to be cuboidal or columnar cells. So this is what we call maturation. Maturation. As we move toward the external environment, these cells are going to flatten. Okay, so this is called keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. If the superficial cells contained keratin, so keratin is a protein, right? Protein, and it's going to give protection against friction, abrasion, and water. And examples of this are going to be found in the skin, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and the inner surface of the esophagus. So this is the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. If you don't have this keratin in the superficial layer, this is what we call non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So again, many layers of flat cells, but without the keratin. And this is going to be found in areas such as the tongue, mouth, esophagus, inside of the mouth, and the vagina, stratified cuboidal. So this is going to be multiple layers of cube-shaped cells. So these are going to be multiple layers of cube-shaped cells, and this is rare, but it's found in some places, such as the salivary glands. And finally, stratified columnar. So this is going to be multiple layers of column-shaped cells. Multiple layers of column-shaped cells, and again, this is rare. This is found in some places, such as the conjunctiva of the eye. Conjunctiva of the eye, male urethra, and the anus, and the last type that I'm going to mention is transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium, and this is what we call urothelium. So what is the function of this type of epithelium? Well, the function is to allow the tissue to stretch. So where do we need the tissue to stretch? Well, mainly in areas where there is a need for expansion. So think of the urinary bladder. When you fill your bladder with urine, it's going to expand, right? It needs to expand. That's why we need this type of stratified stratified transitional epithelium in the urinary bladder, and also the rest of the urinary tract. So transitional epithelium is also known as urothelium. So that was an introduction to epithelial tissue. We talked about simple epithelium and stratified epithelium. The four types of animal tissues are epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue covers the body surfaces, lines body cavities, and forms glands. It has several functions including protection, secretion, absorption, and diffusion. It is made up of closely packed cells with little or no intercellular space, and it rests on a non-cellular basement membrane. The different shapes of epithelial cells are squamous, which are flat and scale-like, cuboidal, which are cube-shaped, and columnar, which are tall and column-shaped. Based on the shape and arrangement of the cells, there are different types of epithelial tissue. For example, simple squamous epithelium is found in areas where diffusion or filtration occurs, such as the lungs. Simple cuboidal epithelium is involved in secretion and absorption, as seen in kidney tubules and glands. Simple columnar epithelium, which may contain goblet cells that secrete mucus, lines the digestive tract, while stratified squamous epithelium provides protection against abrasion and is found in areas like the skin and the lining of the mouth. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium, which appears layered, but is not, lines the respiratory tract and secretes and moves mucus. Connective tissue. Connective tissue supports and connects different parts of the body. It has several functions, including support, protection, insulation, transportation, and storage. Unlike epithelial tissue, it has a high proportion of extracellular material compared to the amount of cells. Connective tissue consists of three main components: cells, fibers, and ground substance, which together form the extracellular matrix. The different types of connective tissue include loose connective tissue, which provides support and binds other tissues together. Dense connective tissue, which is tough and fibrous and is found in tendons and ligaments. Cartilage, which is a strong, flexible tissue that cushions and supports the body. Bone, which is a hard, rigid tissue that provides support and protects internal organs. Blood, which is a fluid connective tissue that transports substances throughout the body. Adipose tissue, which stores fat and provides insulation and other functions. Muscular tissue. Muscular tissue is responsible for movement, both voluntary and involuntary. It has several properties that enable it to contract and relax, allowing for movement. These properties include contractility, elasticity, extensibility, and a high capacity for renewal. There are three types of muscle tissue: cardiac muscle found only in the heart, smooth muscle in the walls of internal organs, and skeletal muscle attached to bones and responsible for voluntary movement. Each type of muscle tissue has a unique structure and function. And finally, we have nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is responsible for transmitting nerve impulses throughout the body. It has several functions, including control, coordination, integration, and communication. The main cell type in nervous tissue is the neuron, which is a specialized cell that can transmit electrical signals. Other types of cells in nervous tissue include neuroglia, which support and protect neurons. Neurons consist of a cell body containing the nucleus, dendrites that receive signals, and an axon that transmits signals. Nervous tissue is found in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Let's take a look at the properties of these tissues. Epithelial tissue generally has a high regeneration capacity, meaning that it can repair and replace damaged cells quickly. This is important for tissues that are exposed to external environments, such as the skin, where protection from the environment is crucial. Connective tissue also has a significant regenerative capacity, especially in loose and dense connective tissue. However, cartilage and bone have a more limited capacity for renewal, and their repair process can be slow. Muscle tissue has a moderate capacity for renewal, with skeletal muscle having the greatest ability to regenerate, followed by smooth muscle and cardiac muscle, which has the least capacity for renewal. Nervous tissue has a very low capacity for renewal, and damage to neurons can result in permanent loss of function. In terms of vascularity, epithelial tissue is highly vascularized, meaning it has a good blood supply, except for certain types like stratified squamous epithelium in the skin, which has a limited blood supply. Connective tissue is also highly vascularized, with the exception of cartilage, which is avascular. Muscle tissue is highly vascularized due to its need for oxygen and nutrients during contraction. And nervous tissue is moderately vascularized, with blood vessels supplying nutrients to the neurons and their supporting cells. Now let's discuss the innervation of these tissues. Epithelial tissue is generally poorly innervated, meaning it has few nerve endings, except for some specialized epithelial tissues like glands and sensory organs. Connective tissue is also poorly innervated, with the exception of some types of connective tissue like bone, where specialized receptors are present. Muscle tissue is highly innervated because muscle contraction is under nervous control. And nervous tissue is richly innervated, with neurons communicating directly with each other through synapses. Next, let's consider the location of these tissues in the body. Epithelial tissue lines body surfaces, both external and internal, and forms glands. It is found covering the skin, lining the digestive tract, respiratory tract, reproductive system, and other internal organs. It also forms the lining of the ducts in glands. Connective tissue is widely distributed throughout the body and supports and connects different tissues and organs. It is found beneath epithelial tissue, forming a layer called the lamina propria, and surrounds and cushions internal organs. Muscle tissue is attached to bones or internal organs and is responsible for movement. It is found in the skeletal muscles, which are attached to bones by tendons, and in the heart and walls of internal organs. Nervous tissue is located in specific areas throughout the body, such as the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. It is also found in ganglia, which are clusters of neurons, and in the retina and sensory organs. Finally, let's discuss the development of these tissues during embryogenesis. Epithelial tissue, connective tissue, and muscle tissue are derived from the three primary germ layers during embryonic development. Epithelium arises from the ectoderm, endoderm, and mesoderm. Connective tissue develops from the mesoderm, and muscle tissue develops from the mesoderm. Nervous tissue, however, is unique as it develops from the ectoderm through a process called neurulation, resulting in the formation of the neural tube, which gives rise to the brain and spinal cord. To summarize, the human body is composed of four primary tissue types: epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous tissue. Each tissue type has a unique structure and function that contribute to the overall health and proper functioning of the organism. Epithelial tissue covers body surfaces, lines cavities, and forms glands, providing protection, secretion, absorption, and diffusion. Connective tissue supports and connects different body parts, offering protection, insulation, transportation, and storage. Muscle tissue is responsible for movement and contraction. And nervous tissue transmits nerve impulses for control, coordination, integration, and communication. Understanding the characteristics of these tissues is fundamental to comprehending how the human body functions as a whole. Thank you for watching this lecture. If you find it useful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your colleagues. Also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. See you in the next lecture.